The idea of rest is captured in two Hebrew words, and these are the Hebrew words that translate to the word rest in English. The first one is the word Shabbat, which means to cease from. God ceases from his work in Genesis 2:1 because it is finished. The other Hebrew word, nuach, means to take up residence or settle in. And we see this in Exodus 10:14, where the locusts came upon the land of Egypt and rested. They settled in, they took up residence in all the land. See, when God or people nuach, it is, I'm going to have fun trying to say this throughout this message. It always involves settling into a place that is safe, secure, and stable. 2 Samuel 7:1 says that now King David dwelt in his house, for Yahweh had provided rest from his enemies. What's interesting is that in Genesis 2, nuach is not used in the creation account. But what we read in that creation account is exactly that word written out. God is settling his creation into a place that is safe, secure, and stable. It's the Garden of Eden. So when we think of the biblical understanding of rest, it entails both of these components, the Shabbat and the nuach, ceasing and settling in. So I'm very particular about how I like to enjoy my shows on TV or a movie on TV. The first thing is I cannot multitask. My wife, she can. I just don't know how she does it because I'm like, I can't. I can't be checking my phone. I can't be working on a project. I can't be chatting about anything. I have to stop everything. The other thing is finding that perfect spot on the couch. We have a little bit older couch, and so it takes us a little bit of a while, at least for me, it takes me a little bit of a while to find that perfect spot. And so I'm moving around, shifting around. But when I find it, I settle in. And it's at that point, once I found just that perfect, tender spot on that couch, that I fully enjoy this show. See, this is the beauty and depth of Sabbath rest that I see played out in these two actions. When we cease and settle in, we get to enjoy the rest that we've been invited into. So I can stop after a run, and that would be rest. But I wouldn't be fully enjoying that rest because I'd still be breathing pretty hard. On the other hand, if I try to settle in somewhere but don't cease, I'm reminded of the story of Martha and Mary, where Martha was busy with all the preparations of hosting and missing the greatest gift of simply being present with Jesus. Now, Sabbath rest is more than the practice of Shabbat and nuach. Sabbath is practicing the context of relationship with God, which must be grounded in a deeper and deeper trust. The line in Genesis 2, God had finished the work he had been doing, can be a stumbling block for so many of us. God ceased because he was done. But for a lot of us, when we think of work, it feels like it never ceases. The perception that work, whether it's our hourly work, our salary work, unseen, or perhaps some of the underappreciated work, is never finished, can feel like a curse. And there's a reality to that some of the work we're engaged in will actually never cease. Some of us who are engaged in the work of justice and peacemaking are faced with the reality that the injustice we are fighting for may not be finished in our lifetime. Yet we engage it because it is God's work and it is good work. And so we practice Shabbat in order to be in the work for the long haul. For some of us, for many of us here, who are raising kids and providing for our families, we face that reality every day. When we clock out of one area of work, we come home to a whole slew of another amount of work. If I've had to do laundries, especially with my twins, I can finish a load and put it away, and before it's all done, the hamper is filled again with new clothes. It is maddening. Like, It's maddening for me. Right? But it can feel like there's always work to be done. And so rather than escape and cope in harmful ways, we stay present because we affirm and receive the gift of our families. So we practice Shabbat, and we create healthy boundaries and rhythms in our lives so that we can be fully present to those in our midst. So Shabbat and Nuach and this idea of Sabbath rest is found in a person, and it pulls us into deeper trust. But there's something else that happens when we experience and practice this. And if we have time, I've totally lost track of time here, we're going to have some space to dialogue about this at the very end. So this is kind of my wrapping thought is before I give us time to do that. When we think of rest, we might think of immediate relief or release from a point of tension. But when we consider Sabbath rest, it's not quite the same. Like we get to experience that. There is rest, there is relief, but there's so much more to that. There's rest that is beyond our physical needs, that reaches into our souls and our spirits that only God can do. So that's the difference of rest that is found in this world and rest that is found in faith. See, Sabbath is a faith practice that draws us into a deeper awareness of God's presence with us. Psalm 62:5 says, "Yes, my soul, find rest in God. My hope comes from him." When sin entered the narrative and the curse was introduced in Genesis 3, the new reality for human existence became void of the nuach that God intended for his creation. Though ceasing can happen, the settling in felt aloof and distant and unknown to mankind. There was no longer a place that was safe, secure, and stable for God's creation. Instead of the place for flourishing of life, we see death and destruction. But here's the thing. God never abandoned his people, and he never ditched his plan to nuach his people. Matthew 11:28 says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Our nuach is now found in the person and presence of Jesus Christ. And so when we think of the Sabbath as a practice, we might look at it not as a command to obey, rather a promise to experience, a person to know, a faith and a relationship to work on. And the other thing is this, that God blesses his creation all throughout the creation narrative. Genesis 1 and 2. And in that blessing, it's a flourishing, right? It's to be fruitful and multiply. So God blessed day 7 too. And so what does that mean? That connection to the seventh day rest. It is the idea that the Sabbath would become many as it's observed and experienced by others. In other words, the gift of Sabbath rest isn't just for individual believers. Rather, it's a blessing for communities of people. So then, there's this question. What does Sabbath look like? And how do we practice this? I don't quite have a solid answer for that. We're going to get to these questions really quickly. But I think there's some things to explore. And the first is this. There is a reality that we need to cease from our work. We are given work to do. It is good work to do. But if work consumes us, that becomes the idol, and there's a need to cease. What's amazing about where we're at as a church, and this is where I'm going to just say this as kind of a moment of being proud, is that we implemented a sabbatical policy before we were burning out. We might have been on the verge of burning out because of the pandemic. But you get it. We're 8 years in, and rather than having a pastor at 10 or 15 years in absolute burnout, ditching the church, ready to leave, we said, hey, we need to have a sabbatical policy for our pastors. And so Elliot actually gets to have his this coming year. So If he's gone for a month, you guys know he's on a sabbatical. And we can keep him accountable to actually take it. But that's the beauty of Sabbath rest. Is that yes, it is a very practical experience where we stop and cease from some of our work. But the other aspect of it is that it also pulls us to stop our striving. So it's not just physical labor that we stop from, but it's some of that internal work that we need to recognize and acknowledge and put a cease to. Because for some of us, the work here is much harder than the work with our hands. There's a reality that some of this work we've been holding on to for decades, we haven't been willing to let it stop. So God says, come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest. In other words, I will be your rest. My only thought for the practice of Nuach really would just be a visualization of a spiritual couch. Like, just imagine, close your eyes, let your body experience this. Not in the chairs that you're in, because these are some not so nice chairs. But just imagine your body right now, right? You're in a spot that has been your favorite spot, whether it's firm or soft. It is a spot that your body needs to feel settled. And so you can feel from your head, your shoulders, releasing some of that tension. You feel in your back this release. Your spine is able to breathe. You feel your legs stretch out. You feel even your feet, that there's room. And that sense of resting is because you've settled in. For a lot of us, we need a spiritual couch. We've been craving a spiritual couch. And God all along has said, I will provide that for you. But let's figure out what that looks like together. And so here's the work that I want us to do today. I'm not giving you guys very much application, so I'm sorry about that. But I want to learn from you guys, because I feel like some of you guys have had very solid Sabbath practices. If you don't, we'll navigate this together. So I'd like for us to do this. Here's how we can apply it. We'll figure it out together. The first thing is I feel like we need to talk about it. So if you're with your spouse, if you're with a friend, if you're with your community, if you guys have not talked about what Sabbath rest might look like in your family or in your relationship, I want to give us time to do that today. So the question is, what might a weekly, monthly, and yearly rhythm of rest that invites you to cease and settle into the Lord, what might that look like? And here's the other question. What community practice of rest would you like to see in your faith community? Because the other thing is, it's not just a personal thing. It's not just something that I need rest, so God gives it to me. It's that we need rest, and that God invites us to experience that. And so it's a collective work that we do together. And as we do that here, we're able then to invite other people into that space too.